This is episode 4 of Shadowscast for the Casting Shadows blog. This episode will be looking at some topics that have nothing to do with the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons. One important factor to consider in a game as open as anything run by Ubiquity, but particularly for this segment, All for One, is the concept of can versus should. And while the use of should is decried often as telling people how to play, why is it alright to follow one set of rules, such as how to roll to hit, but not follow certain conventions, such as being true to the setting? You should do something to be true to the setting, whereas you have to do something a certain way to be true to the, say, the combat rules or the social management rules. So, with this in mind, in a setting like All for One, Regime Diabolique, we're in 1636 France, and there are certain attitudes to things like magic or dueling that enable you to experience that setting. If you choose to do something that has more of a flavor, let's say, of traditional D&D, popping fireballs off in the streets of Paris, are you really playing the game? So what really does being true to setting mean? I think not unlike the war between can and should, you have the war between wish fulfillment and challenge. And if the level of wish fulfillment that you're engaging exceeds merely adopting a role that has to conform to certain societal and universal rules, like gravity, damage from weapons, hunger, fatigue, that sort of thing, things that we have no problem accepting, why is it that we have trouble with societal or cultural or pure setting rules, like magic doesn't work that way, or religion has this effect on society? Try and solve your problems within the boundaries of that setting. How hard is it? So what this is really all about is genre fidelity. Most of us seem to be very willing to put in a certain amount of effort to learn a new game system. The basic rules of how to navigate the physical reality of the game, fighting, wooing women, or men, or whatever. That's no problem. What dice do I roll to do that? What is less attractive for the investment of energy seems to be learning how to play the game. And what I mean by that is genre fidelity. Learning how to interact with the game setting as your character would if your character were real. We're talking about immersion. All right. Not talking about wearing a feathered hat, prancing around and using an accent and waving plastic weapons. We're not talking about, that level of acting. We are talking about is if you're playing a role-playing game, to role-play. And this goes beyond stating what your character will do. This goes into investing time and attention into who that character is and how they would react according to the ethics, the ethos, the structure of their society. Is this too much work? Well, how much work do we really invest in the hobby? The Game Master is designing encounters, which might involve creating histories, a vast host of fairly detailed NPCs, maps, if you're into that sort of thing. That's a lot of work. That's considered to be normal. Reading a couple of paragraphs about how a particular class of person is perceived in a setting. Is this work? Or is this something that you haven't built the habit of doing? That's my question. How hard is it? how hard is genre fidelity? I bring this up mostly because of games like pulp games or science fiction games, unusual fantasy games, where it's not just a skin for the modern world. If we're playing heroic pulp or a pirate setting or some other kind of swashbuckling Three Musketeers, like All for One, as we were talking about earlier in the segment, what would those characters be like? And would they be like someone from 2012 with their attitudes and limitations? Is it worth the effort? Of course it's worth the effort. It was worth the effort to graduate through different stages of the different role-playing games that we've come to love. You know, from basic D&D to advanced D&D to whatever edition you ended up coming to think of as your own. You know, Vampire the Masquerade 2nd edition, revised edition, and now they brought it back again. Battletech, Call of Cthulhu. All of these evolutions are worthwhile, right? And those are just talking about mechanical evolutions. You don't want to elevate your play as well? Give it a try. You might surprise yourself. One of the recurring themes on the Casting Shadows blog over the last year and a half has been MechWarrior. And in particular, the campaign that we're running as a play-by-email game, which is a synthesis, really, of the classic tabletop war game with the role-playing game. And I've found that A Time of War is excellent for that. But at the same time, it's never really easy. And over a series of posts, I tried to address that, but have never really boiled it down to its core element. And frankly, what I think that is managing expectations. And that may seem trite or overly simplistic, but really, every time there has been, let's say, dissatisfaction or confusion or a slowdown in processing turns, it really has been as a result of mismanaged expectations. And anybody in the group could be responsible for that. It could be the game master, whose expectations for comprehension or participation or proactivity or I guess investment in that hybrid scene might be too high or too low. And for the players, those who only have experience with the tabletop version, let's say the standard rules of Battletech, who have never played a double-blind game or have never played a game with a referee or GM, they go into this hybrid version of the game, a blend of RPG and wargame elements, expecting to have all the information that they would have if they were playing a tabletop game. And they've had no contrary experience to prepare them for what it would be like to play it more like the first-person shooter version of the video game, where you really don't have this top-down God view of everything that's going on. You see what you see, and you notice what you notice. And some of this is being controlled by perception rolls, and some of it's being controlled by the fog of war, and so on. So going into it, if I were to do it again, I would definitely want to lay out expectations much more clearly than we did even after the second major battle. Going into our campaign, we knew it was a work in progress. We hadn't played Battletech in over a decade, none of us. And when we had been playing it, it was tabletop. Our instances of playing MechWarrior were few and far between, and in those days we're talking about first and second edition, and those experiences could be a little frustrating. So having this shiny new rule set, the 4th edition, which synthesized the tidy new rules in Total Warfare and tactical operations and strategic operations, the opportunity was tempting, too tempting. So we gave it a whirl. But we knew that there would be some rough edges, particularly because we were playing it as a play-by-email, not actually sitting down. So, is it possible to truly mix the wargame experience with the role-play experience beyond just naming the pilot and tracking experience, or beyond abstracting everything about combat? Can you really mix them? Sure, you can, and you can see the records of this on the Casting Shadows blog. Each recorded battle in the actual play MechWarrior section was played out through email. Everything was rolled. Nothing was hand-waved or fudged. It's all how it went. We've been having a great time. Has everyone been 100% satisfied? No. But we're getting there. And the last hurdle that we're working with now is how really to handle initiative and its connection to tactics and information handling. As we've gone through each battle, we've been drifting closer and closer to a simultaneous initiative system. And we'll be doing 2 playtests of that, and you'll hear reports of that in the future. My money's still on the standard initiative, but I'm open-minded enough to see how it goes. So, managing expectations, I feel, is the foundation for mixing pure roleplay with pure tabletop experience, so that you can truly play a game like MechWarrior, with your character going from the barracks to the bar, into the cockpit, into battle, out on the negotiating arena, and then back into the mechs or wherever seamlessly. And A Time of War is a great game that lets you do all of that through its tactical addendum, and of course your own group's willingness to incorporate a lot of the more advanced rules from tactical operations, which really support that more realistic, gritty, in the cockpit kind of feel that you would get if you were actually there. Having just moved to a new city, play-by-email is rising again in importance in my gaming life. So this final section, to round out this 4th Shadowscast episode, is quick tips on running a play-by-email. You can see many of these tips on the blog already, but maybe it's easier this way. First, if you're not going to use a forum, use Gmail. It's easy to organize, easier to search. Tag everything. Filter everything. Use the labs. Bring in multiple inboxes so that it's never a problem to find the email that you're looking for. Encourage your players to do the same. So, when in Gmail, all incoming mail related to your campaign will automatically go into its own inbox and be tagged appropriately. You can even tag it by player if you like. Don't be afraid to use multiple threads for one campaign. Gmail only has 100 messages per thread anyway, so things are going to get split regardless of what you want. But trying to maintain any kind of logical flow or dramatic flow to your story, while out-of-character questions, in-character descriptions, and just questions for clarification are scattered all throughout the thread, it's impossible. Don't do it. Maintain an out-of-character thread for all out-of-character interactions. Stick to it. Delete the stuff that doesn't conform. Inform the player where they need to post. You don't have to be a dick about it. Everyone will have a question eventually, and they'll understand once they have to go searching through acres of crap that didn't need to exist. Okay? Keep threads discreet. Then, keep a separate thread open for in-character chat. Right? That way, the players, when you're not around, can continue a conversation, and you can interrupt it when it's dramatically appropriate. Right? You don't need to be involved in the flow of it at all. For combat, you do have to be involved, obviously. And information is not always going to be something you can share equally. So, maintain a separate in-character combat thread for each character in your game. You don't have to go so far as maintaining a separate out-of-character combat thread for everybody, unless they're hunting each other, of course. But you see what I mean. One in-character thread for chatting. You tell them when they can chat there and let them go. If they go too far, you edit that part out, make it very clear something happened before this. For combat, in-character, separate threads for each player. You can do a lot of cutting, pasting back and forth. The extra workload isn't that much unless they start to drift. Like if you're doing something like Hollow Earth Expedition, where for dramatic purposes you're expecting to split the party up and cut back and forth between them, you're going to be describing different scenes a lot. But for team-based play, like virtually any dungeon crawl, or shipboard, military action, that kind of thing, a lot of the descriptions can just be cut and pasted into each person's thread, with what they particularly notice about the scene added in for flavor. Things they hear or only hear partially or only see partially. And it can heighten the experience. Later on, when you open it up to everybody and start sharing what has passed, they can experience the story again through another character's point of view. And that can be very enjoyable and surprising, particularly when they get to step inside the head of those other characters. So to recap, if you're not going to use a forum, where you can easily control access to information, who can read which sections, then use Gmail. Organize heavily from the beginning to save yourself headaches later. Maintain an OOC thread and stick to it. For combat, maintain separate IC threads and stick to it. Give your players the opportunity to express themselves, to role-play with each other in a joint IC conversational thread. And then have a main thread as the narrative flow of your actual campaign story. Add to it regularly so that it doesn't build up and get out of hand. And when you're done, you'll have a complete, live, written record of what you've been playing that you can share from multiple points of view with anybody who's interested. Or you can start a blog and share it with people who aren't interested. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Shadowscast. I look forward to you seeing me next time.